The pharmaceutical industry is a complex and fascinating field. It takes countless of people to bring a high quality product to the market. In the Qualitalks podcast, I bring to you leaders, experts and innovators who will share their experiences and explain to us how they do it. Welcome to the Qualitalks podcast. I'm Yan Kugel, your host, and my guest today is Davidek Herron. Davidek is the head of global digital platforms and operations at Teva Pharmaceuticals. And today we are going to talk about what digitalization means for pharma and why every company must pursue it. So let's get to it. Davidek, welcome to the Qualitalks podcast. I'm really happy to have you on the show. And you are the head of global digital platforms and operations at Teva. And it's amazing to talk to you because I have a lot of appreciations for Teva. I work there, I have friends and family that work there, a lot of connections there. And I know that Teva is all its strengths comes from technology. So that's why it's a huge fun for me to talk to you and understand what is your position is all about. And we will also talk about digitalization. But what are you doing as the head of digital platforms and so on at Teva?
First and foremost, thank you for having me on the show today, Yan. This is a great opportunity for me.
Thank you.
So to reiterate, my name is Davidek, and I do run the global digital platforms and operations here at Teva Pharmaceuticals. So what does that mean? That there's a lot in that, right? So really, my team is in charge of working very closely with the countries to figure out how we can best get medicines to patients, right? For this conversation today, I'll be focusing a lot on the commercialization side and customer experience, because that's something that we've seen, at least with the uprising of COVID-19, that this is something we need to pay a big focus on, right? This is something that we need to better make sure our teams are capable of delivering that right message, that right service to our customers to ensure that, again, we get those medicines to patients. So thank you again for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure, Davidek. So again, real fun talking to you. And the digitalization arena is really interesting. What is the term mean for you? So as a specialist here in the arena.
Great question, Jan. So really, I like to break it down to two parts. Left side, customer experience, and then the right side, data and automation, right? And I think that's really going to be the key in the coming years, is really that data side. But before we get there, and again, my views today are speaking in general, right? Even outside of Teva, it's the fact that in our industry in life sciences, a lot of our time now is spent on the foundational work, right? So making sure we have the right systems and tech in place. And what we do see is the fact that, even in certain situations, you can have the right systems and tech in place, but if you don't have the right people or mindset and skill set to drive that, you're out of luck, right? So it's pretty interesting. So to answer your question, what does digitalization mean to me? It means a lot of things with a focus on, again, how can we get the right people in the right place and the right tech to support them at the end of the day to get the medicines to the patients. So as you know, within the value chain, from manufacturing, down to R&D to even getting medicines on the shelf, right? That there's a lot of different parts of that. And what we're seeing today, at least with COVID, the acceleration on the front end, on the commercialization part, right? In regards to, all right, in the past, we were able to have, representatives or medical science liaisons, knock on the door and talk to pharmacists, talk to physicians, to inform them about new drugs that are available, to new things that are there. But then with COVID, that hit us early in the year, that came to a halt. Yet we even had we had even more of an urgency need for a lot of these life-saving medicines. So we had to think differently. So to answer your question again, digitalization in my mind is really how do we get the right systems in place to support our customers to get medicines to patients. So I think in regards, if you compare us life sciences to other industries, I do think from a maturity perspective, we are getting better. And I do feel that, maybe this is a question that comes down the line, that we will leapfrog a lot of industries very soon. Just because of the fact that we don't have no other option. Because if you look at our industry today in life sciences real quick, Jan, it's we focus a lot on face-to-face interactions, right, in regards to at least commercialization. But now that's starting to change, and that shift is happening very fast.
Do you think that pharma is still a bit lagging behind the industries, but in your perspective, you think that pharma will soon be first and they will overcome this and overhaul others? Because it must.
Again, back to the value chain. I think in the R&D and the manufacturing distribution, I think we're definitely at par, if not ahead of a lot of industries. This is how we physically move API and medicines globally around the world, and the quality that we deliver, I think, is world class. In regards to commercialization of that and customer experience, I do feel that as an industry we could do better, and I think that can only happen with collaboration between specific potentially competitors, right? With at the end of the day of trying to get the best product to the patient that needs it.
And what do you mean collaboration? How can it help?
Yeah, so this is almost like an open platform. And again, this is my thoughts, not Teva's here, but it's I do feel that put yourself in a physician's shoes. They have 6 or 7 different companies potentially trying to promote the same kind of drug to them, and they need to differentiate, what product is best for their patient. But then at the end of the day, specifically now with COVID, I mean, their time is limited, and their job is really to have FaceTime with their patients. And now, obviously, with the emergence of telemedicine, a lot of that is done remotely, but their job is to maximize their time with their patients and not necessarily maximize their time with the, let's say, life science companies trying to sell them things. So what I do foresee is there will be almost a consolidation in regards to at least how the information gets to a physician, whether that's third parties like WebMD that really collaborate out of this, let's say, a marketing approach, but more of a, hey, here's a one source to get all your information for this therapeutic area. That we can, at the end of the day, the pie still needs to grow, right? There's a lot of patients that still need to get access to medicines that don't, right? So it's a win-win for the shareholder companies that currently exist. So to answer your question, Yan, again, it's which is a good one. I do foresee that we will have a situation in the coming years where there will be more collaboration, let's say, obviously in a compliant way, for us to really best serve the physicians and pharmacists.
You mentioned the digitalization, and all the platforms are really important for the whole life cycle of the drug, from the production to marketing, and it probably needs some harmonization between the system to really make it as efficient as possible. And what are your thoughts about this issue before the marketing phase, the digitalization and platforms during the manufacturing, the quality production?
So I think the area I would like to focus on is actually, and this is something that you're seeing globally from a lot of companies, is out of stock situations, right? We see this a lot specifically on the generic side where, certain manufacturers are out of stock on the medicine. I think on the manufacturing side, I think there could be more of a collaboration. And again, a lot of companies are doing this, but we're not there yet, where we can start using, smart algorithms, start using, best practice to really predict and forecast the need for specific APIs to create these molecules, the need to get certain stockpiled of drugs and make sure we don't have out of stock issues where patients are not able to get their drugs. I think on the manufacturing side, this is one thing I would focus on, the selfishly, just because that's where my passion is getting medicines to patients. But how can we better forecast the manufacturing of these medicines to align with the commercial needs, if that makes sense?
Do you think this data and this analysis, on what level will it be done? It will be more AI data? Will it be data analysts that will sit and do those evaluations?
I think it comes down to the people creating the right algorithms, right? In regards to really understanding what are we trying to solve for, right? And as you know, there's a lot of geopolitical and things that we just cannot control. But I mean, if you look at data science in general, these are things potentially you can hedge for and risk, right? So I think there will be emergence of really the power of data. If you remember when I originally started this conversation, right, it starts obviously on customer experience transformation, but then data and automation. And I truly feel that in the next 10 years, as it has been, but there will be even more of a focus on the data side, and specifically for manufacturing in regards to how do we manage stock more effectively.
Right. And how do you see it work with collaboration and through the whole chain of management, from top to bottom, to how will it be automated, or how is it already automated in some issues that there is the market and there is the manufacturing, and how does it all come together in a really smooth way, so there is some automation, there are some algorithms that say, okay, we have some stock issues in this country. How does it come to the manufacturing site in a different, some distant country and says, okay, start manufacturing, check your raw materials. You need to manufacture, you need raw materials, make sure you have the stock for that. And so many moving parts.
There is, right? And I think the first thing and I think a lot of this already exists, right? But the first thing you do is you need to get on some central ERP platforms, enterprise platforms, where the different manufacturing sites are talking. So this is something that obviously the big players like Deloitte's, Accentures of the world make their money on, is really, putting these solutions in place to at least start having those conversations. But again, you named it, right? There's a lot of situations where, I mean, there's seasonality that take part of it. There's potential trade issues we can run into as well, right? I mean, so that's a hard question. That's something that obviously is $1 million or $1 billion question of how do we potentially, mitigate these risks in the future. But again, to answer your question, I do think that the focus should be around data, having a foundation in place where manufacturing sites or even lines are talking. And again, we do have some of the smartest people in the world working on these and solving these issues currently, but we're not there yet, right? And it's a maturity level.
You mentioned the sites speaking to each other and collaborating. And of course, so it's interesting because Teva is in a conglomerate. It's a huge company with a lot of divisions and manufacturing sites all over the world. It's the same for many other big companies that acquire other companies, and then they need to harmonize the systems and make sure that everything ticks. So I know so Teva does this a lot by acquiring other companies and doing it. So how does it work? How do you quickly implement those systems in new acquired companies, for example?
First and foremost, consolidating and really getting the synergies there. Where now that there is situations where if you're running low someplace, you can pull it from somewhere else, right? And obviously the technology in the back end is really help making that possible. But it also, again, if there's anything I can talk about in this conversation, is people. We have the best people, right? I mean, led by Eric up top, down low, right? I mean, it's really a great organization and people care. And then really, when they come to work, it's not that they're creating medicines. They're really coming to work to create medicines to save people, right? And really, it comes down to the one Teva culture and really the commitment that we want to really give to the world.
How do you cultivate such a culture, to make sure that every single person cares about the quality and about the end product and the patient?
Yeah. So I'll give you my opinion, right? And this is my opinion is it starts top down and bottom up, right? I mean, you need to be very clear as an organization where we're headed, and that's very clear at Teva. But then secondarily, I mean, it's I'm from New York. You got to walk the walk, right? Talk is cheap, and we are seeing that from our leadership, right? They live and they die by their principles, which is good, right? So it's I think that really starts there.
I think it's really important that each person knows his part of the end product. Although there are so many departments in pharma, and sometimes not everyone knows what the other is doing.
Yes.
And I think that it's sometimes a shame. And I think that when people really know and understand how everything comes together, everything works a bit better. And I think some companies can learn from it, really to involve each person, each department, in what everyone is doing.
So I think the systems are in place, leveraging obviously things such as Yammer, right? That's almost an industry standard tool that a lot of companies use. But these boards really to help or allow people to communicate. So the good thing is those systems and technologies are in place to do that. And then now if you create these reward systems to allow people to share their successes, but also share their failures, right? So that's something we don't like to talk about a lot, but sometimes you need to highlight failures because you learn from that, right? And that's also another cultural aspect as well.
Right. So basically, exactly. I think it's also very important in quality, to highlight the failures and not with the finger pointing, but to learn from it, to analyze it, and to get better. So, what is, in your opinion, why should every company really invest the time to really automate, digitalize?
So that's a great question, Jan. I'll try to break that up into two different aspects. I'll break it up first on, let's say, our B2B customers. So this is where we're actually selling medicines to a hospital system, selling it to a pharmacist. Why digitalization is very important is the fact that, again, I mentioned this before, A lot of companies try to leverage face-to-face interactions, having reps physically walk into the hospital or the pharmacy to sell the product, right, with the iPad. Which again, it is a very let's say productive model. But with that said, specifically now, even with COVID, I mean, there has to be a situation where pharma's not setting the expectations now. We have other companies outside of life sciences, the Amazons, the Googles, et cetera, that are really setting expectations how we as consumers or as people interact with other businesses and other customers. And now pharma is actually in a situation where we can actually leverage a lot of those best practices, such as e-commerce and self-service. For example, if you're selling medicines to a pharmacist or a hospital system, they should also have the ability to do a self-service as well, right? They should have the ability to go to their personalized website to get their invoice information, to get all the information they need about out of stock issues or potential out of stock issues. They should be able to order the medicines without having to have a face-to-face interaction. With smart algorithms in the back end, they recommend, hey, these are the next best products that we foresee that you probably should have on your shelf based on this influx of patients you're probably going to see, right? So these are the services specifically on the B2B side, why I think digitalization is very powerful. In addition to our people, right? Then once you have your people coming in, they really can focus on servicing versus selling, right? How can we help the pharmacists, perform their business more effectively, right? How can we help them spend more time at the end of the day with their patients? Now, if you look at it from a healthcare provider side, it's almost similar, right? So I made the example before, a doctor, typically would have multiple representatives, walking to their office a day when that's just not realistic anymore. How can we create these platforms where they have a trusted source that they know it's quality information, that they can get information around where, all right, in this space in oncology, I have a patient that's facing this, what are my options, right? And they should have a non-biased, location where they can get this information. Or even, we're seeing a lot of onset of this where they're creating these communities, right? These online communities with their peers that, their peer might be 200 miles away or even 2,000 miles away, that in the past they wouldn't necessarily maybe have connected with them, right? Or even got that information. So again, I do think digital, and again, it's not life sciences driving this, it's the world. It's the Elon Musk and everyone else of the world, Bezos, that's driving this change. It's now that pharma and our customers are expecting it, as they should. And one thing we haven't talked a lot about today is patients, right? I mean, as patients, patient information, this is something that, they demand this as well. So it's funny, right? So at the end of the day, specifically even at Teva, our job is to produce the highest quality medicines, right? And then in addition to that, we need to make sure we're the easiest company to do business with, right? As well. And digital is really the key to really driving a lot of that.
Right. So what you're talking about is basically giving the best platforms also for the end consumer, or at least for the pharmacist and the buyers to access the data really easily without sending sales reps to hospitals and without visiting each doctor, right? So it takes a lot of time. But the question is, do you see here some collaboration, some database between companies where doctors need a medication for this, and then they input in a search engine the information and get the all information about each drugs? Because what you said, okay, we want to make it easy, but how do you get the doctor to look at your website? So you need to make sure he does it and he goes to your website and not from competitors. But if you have some consolidated database trusted by several companies which work together, to make it available, what do you think about this solution, for example?
Yeah, so this is bringing back my hat. So again, I created the digital marketing team in the US 6 years ago now. Back then, we would talk about how do we prioritize our websites for the doctor to visit over someone else, and then you start going, all right, well, Google, SEO, right? The first thing the doctor's going to do is probably go there. But now, if you fast forward, I think it's all about workflow, Yan. How do we make sure that we get the quality information within the current workflow of the doctor? You don't want the doctor having to step out, go to a web browser and try to find a website to get information. It all should be within the system that they're working. And the reality is now globally, with the emergence of electronic health records in these systems, doctors spend, a lot of time in these systems. I think it's around 5 to 6 hours a day in these electronic health systems, right? So remember, these are the systems that doctors use in regards to bringing up patient information, understanding what products they're on, understanding what other physicians are seeing, right? So they have a full 360 view of them. Be able to actually specifically prescribe products to these systems, understanding what products are on formulary for the patient. So really, it's almost a one-stop shop where in the past, as you know, this was paper, right? And I remember, when I was a sales manager and we would go in New York, you'd walk into a doctor's office and you see the whole back wall was just full of these yellow envelopes, right, with patient information. That's all gone now. That's all digital in the EHR systems. With that said, that brings the next caveat: the doctors is always on the tablet. And to answer your question, I think what we can do outside of this building these fancy websites as an industry is we need to figure out how to partner with these EHR companies. How do we actually get information in them? And I'm not talking about just advertisement, right? So right now the focus is, hey, can we advertise in Epic? Can we advertise in these different electronic health systems or even pharmacy systems? But it's more so, right, when that situation comes up, is there a notification we can send a doctor that, hey, this patient potentially is a good candidate for X, therapeutic area, right? And then it's up to them to understand from insurance coverage what drug is best on the formulary there for them. So again, it's to answer your question in a long way, but shortly, it all comes down to what is the workflow of the customer and how do we seamlessly incorporate ourselves in the workflow versus creating something on the side that just capitalizes more of their time that takes away from their patients.
Right. So you're talking about consolidating the pharma companies inside the healthcare system, basically giving the pharma companies access to health records, so they can more easily help and automatically recommend drugs for specific treatments.
It's not allowing pharma access, it's allowing those systems access to pull information that pharma can help support, whether it's
Right.
patient information,
Okay.
patient literature, specific, PI information that's on that prescribing, label for the drug. Because if you allow certain industries access to these systems, then next thing you know, it gets into advertisement again. I want to prioritize my brand over someone else's. It's how do you create somewhat of an equal playing field to, at the end of the day, make sure we have the right medicine for that specific patient, right?
Right.
And that's a whole nother topic on around personalized medicine and how do we start, getting down that route. But ideally, again, I think my vision is for this industry at a whole, right, is how do we make sure we maximize our customers' time with their patients? And then by doing that, there's so many steps you need to take.
Right, exactly. So in the end, it could be a great solution because if you save the doctor's time looking up drugs or talking with sales reps, the doctors have more time to concentrate on the patients in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And I do feel that as an industry, if we do this right, we're only going to be able to help service more patients. Whether in the day, more patients means more medicine, which means more finances for the shareholders, right? So it's a win-win for everybody. But let's take it from that way of a collaboration versus differentiation.
Right. So again, you're talking about some like database or connection that talks about um, disease level, not the patient, not the name of the patient personally, but some database of some specific illnesses, which automatically help sort out the correct drugs, which help with this issue. So that's what you're meaning, right?
Correct.
Exactly. Nice. So how does it incorporate in each country? Do you have, as a global head, do you need to look at each country and think what will work there?
So that's a really great question, Jan. So really what it comes down to is the fact that you have to take this you have to have a global vision, but then locally, regionally, we have some of the best general managers and teams within these globally in these markets. And you have to understand what is the current objective or obstacles that they're facing locally, right? So, I mean, it's almost like you don't come in with a solution. You come in with, hey, hear and listen, right? Half my job is listening, what's going on. And then what the reality is, a lot of this is we need to really transform and change how we do business in the majority of the countries that we're in. And part of that, Jan, might be, all right, do we work closer with the health economic systems or whatever it might be to provide, say better, collaborations, more solutions for them to, at the end of the day, get these medicines to the patients, right? So it is a case by case, let's say, situation, because again, you never want to come in with a global head saying you need to do this. Because at the end of the day, our local markets know better than anyone else, right? Local regulations are vastly different, even within the EU, country by country. I mean, you have tendering markets. You have it's so many different. There's so many different models that we face. But at the end of the day, it's the goal is to get these life-saving medicines to these patients, right? And how we do that is different. But we do have some core fundamental things and approaches on how we do that to make that happen.
Right. At the beginning, you mentioned a bit COVID-19. We also noticed that during this time how difficulties and extreme situations push towards innovation and push people really to go overboard and cooperation between companies and so on and so on. So how did Teva overcame this COVID-19 and how did digitalization help during this hard time, and what can others learn from it?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jan. And I think to be very transparent, I don't think anyone has overcame COVID-19 yet. It's still lingering around, and we don't know what the second, third, fourth, or fifth wave
Right.
looks like. But obviously, there's a light on the horizon, which we all see, which is great. And some type of new normal is coming in place.
Right.
But I mean, you have to step back and look at what happened, right? And literally in a matter of weeks, we went from, a current model to, having people sit at home. We had thousands of representatives, medical colleagues, everyone just sitting at home, and that us as well, right? We weren't able to even go into our offices. And the question is, how do we potentially deliver the best service we can to our customers remotely? And half the time it wasn't even us, right? It's how do we make sure our customers are confident using these channels, right? And a lot of this is through virtual meetings like Skype, which we're on today. But how do we, again, it comes down to, and this was a really interesting discussion I had with my peers and other companies, what's good look like, but really what good looks like is understanding what's valuable for our customers, right? In certain situations for certain brands, we found out that, hey, listen, we have nothing really valuable to talk about. So maybe we shouldn't, inundate their email boxes, or maybe we shouldn't really be, trying to contact them as much. And it's more of a pull versus a push approach. But then in other situations, right, we had customers, knocking at the door saying, listen, I need these medicines, I'm out of stock, right? So how do we get in front of them? So, I mean, it was interesting, right? It was definitely eye-opening. And the good thing here at Teva is we had a digital strategy in place 2 years prior. So all this did was really accelerate what we needed to do. We already started a really good campaign around digitalization, so digital access to majority of our customers, mapping of our customers, both on the healthcare provider and obviously pharmacy side. So we were set for success, which is great. And it's kudos to my team that was able to make that happen pre-hand. And then that was just about executing and this really acceleration of these technologies. And also training of our reps as well. So this obviously, talk about the thousands of sales reps that their job changed overnight. Now, as you know, there's always a loop there where you have some that are really good at delivering messages via certain channels and others that are very laggard, right? So we had to make sure we invested again in our people. So in certain situations, we gave them options to do online courses when there was downtime potentially, right? Just because you didn't have to physically travel anymore. So again, it really comes down to the people. I think specifically Teva, during this situation, we excelled at make sure the technology was available and at scale within weeks, which is great. But then more importantly, really the people behind it and how we really ensured our people and understood this is where we're going. This is the current situation. This is how we're going to help you deliver value to your customers. And then vice versa on the other side, right? I think it went well received from our customers that, hey, we're here to help you, right? It's a crazy situation we're all facing. Let us know how we can help. And that's really, I think, what accelerated us from other companies during this time and why we were so successful.
It's amazing how quickly one can do something, and probably not every company can react that quickly. And it's interesting, does the mindset has changed a bit in regard to risk mitigation on the company level, business level, that you say now, okay, now we must put a team or maybe take their risk mitigation on disaster risk mitigation on another level and really think about what can come in 10 years, 20 years, how we can prepare for it and maybe take steps in advance.
What we're trying to focus on now is, again, reinventing that model, right? And I like to say, at least at Teva, that we're forefront here and we're not going to wait for someone else to do it and replicate it. It's more so we know where we need to go. It's how do we move our customers along with us during that journey, right? And again, it comes back to value creation and how we do that. So it's very interesting times again. But on the digital front, it's really exciting because I mean, people are doing things that we probably would have took 10 years to do if COVID unfortunately did not strike. So we're not happy with the current situation with COVID here, but from a digital perspective, again, I'm glad the teams are stepping up and really getting value to our customers.
We're again talking about the issues that disasters or hardships push harder towards innovation. So, what can be done that people don't wait for a hardship and they really put more resources in things like digitalization or maybe in the future and other things to make them happen faster rather than make it more political and drag it across so many years.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, right? So, for example, if I put myself if I was a general manager, right, and I'm managing a country, and I had, my job is to make sure we get, specific medicines to our customers, right? I would already have in my plans for 21 and beyond. A certain percentage of my business is focused around just building that digital base. If you look at a lot of industries outside of even life sciences, they're starting to think this way too, because A, they have no other option, but B, they see the value, right? Because at the end of the day, you're able to expand your reach, expand your frequency, you're able to get potentially better services at scale to your customers. But then it goes in the back end, are you able to supply the demand? Because we are going to increase demand. So are we able to supply on the manufacturing side? But that's a whole nother conversation in regards to forecasting and things like that. So again, I think the key here is from the top down, it's really paint the vision on where we're going to be, let's say by 2025. I wouldn't even go 10 years out, just 5 or 4, and really say that, this is how we get there, but then showing incremental value while you take each one of those steps. So for example, here, we're going to, incorporate marketing automation campaigns with journeys. What does that mean? So said this in the past, a lot of companies, Nike, whoever, would send this emails to customers, right? Hey, here's this, here's that. But now what we're doing is actually starting to create these holistic, specific journeys, right? Where it's very personalized conversations based on your likes, your preferences, right? That the value we think is gonna drive for you as a customer. And in pharma, right? Companies are getting smarter in this space of really understanding when to engage and when not to, and when to engage, what value can we add, right? So this is something that, again, if I was a general manager, I would actually put specific people on my team that are in charge of driving this locally, right? So obviously you need global teams, but at the end of the day, it has to be done locally, right? And understanding and working with the local municipalities, working with the local governments, understanding, how can we, achieve this together, right? Because we're all trying to fight the same thing.
Right. So collaboration and localization in the end, to push it in every area, right? And we are talking also in the beginning that pharma is a bit behind, right? So would you say that's because of regulations? So that is the main reason, because you need to make sure that everything that you do really works out globally and locally?
So I call BS on regulation. I don't think it's regulation because there's a lot of highly regulated industries out there. I think pharma somewhat is behind is the fact that we're very comfortable. Again, I'm not talking specifically Teva here. I'm talking more pharma in general. It's still comfortable. The margins are still high. Let's look at the numbers, right? It's still a very profitable business to be in. And if there's still that high margin profit, you're able to, you're less inclined to change, let's say. Now, with that said, as margins do somewhat normalize and become a little smaller, I do see the fact that marketeers are going to have to think differently. And it comes down to marketeers. In the past, we always said, well, I can't do this because of regulation. I'm just going to send my sales reps out there. I'm going to give a paper digital aid or et cetera, right, to drive. And again, if you have a good sales team, you will hit your numbers. But I think it really comes down to how can we add value? How can we go, outside even the pill, right? How can we support our patient communities? How can we support our pharmacists in achieving their goals, right? And this can only be done by digitalization, but it has to start with the people. And I mentioned this early on in the call, Yan, is the fact that it all starts with the people. If the people have the right mindset and the willingness and want to come up and do something different and challenge the norm, you'll do that. But you see in some companies, you have some people are just used to doing things the way they've done it. It's like almost telling someone to go from an IBM to a Mac. they use the IBM their whole life, and now you're saying, hey, but we eventually need to migrate over to the Mac because of X, Y, Z. We want to start doing graphics or whatever. The change, you have to make that a seamless transition, right? And unfortunately, in certain situations, people are not going to change, right? In some companies, you have to make that decision. How do they move forward? And you'll see that. You'll see. I do predict in a couple of years from now, specifically with COVID now accelerating this, the ones that don't step up and really change and invest in their people to do these amazing things, they will eventually lose. To be very transparent, because there is a lot of players now in this space, and at the end of the day, there's many ways you can make high quality medicines. So again, those are my views and not Teva's, right? But I do feel that certain companies need to step up, and at the end of the day, that's why I think collaboration is key. If we all join together to fight a common cause, it's going to be a win for everybody.
So how do you create such a culture, and you drip it from above, that you make sure that locally every person, every manager, everyone is open for changes and improvements, and you make sure that there is no single people who hold the company from progressing because they don't want to push good ideas up the chain.
Yeah, this is change management 101, Jan, right? I mean, and there's many different ways you can approach this, and it depends on the country and the culture and the regulations as well, right? If you ask me, right, how do you approach this? Again, it starts up top, and there has to be a clear vision as an organization on why you're here, what's your mission, what's your vision, but then where are you headed? And with that said, unfortunately, there's going to be a time where it's not even just life sciences. There's going to be certain industries, as we see, that people are just very risk adverse and they're just not going to change. And I think at that time, it's there's a situation where companies just have to look. They both have to look each other in the eye and say, maybe this is not the right role, right? For those individuals that are not, because you'd be surprised where sometimes one or two people can really stunt the growth of a large organization, and that could be from a leadership perspective, right? So again, it's really, but you want to bring everyone along together. But in reality, sometimes everyone can't just, everyone doesn't want to go on that ride with us. So that's a situation I would say. And then again, but it comes down to investing, right? What we have seen and what I've seen is the fact that if you inspire people and inform them and regularly communicate on where we're headed, they want to be part of that journey, right? And if they don't want to be part of that journey, you need to actually look at your journey. Is that really the right one for organization? And are you really headed in the right direction as well? And then invest in your people, Jan. It all comes down to people, right? And everyone's scared of AI, machine learning, all these algorithms, no matter what part of the business you're in. It's going to replace my job. It's going to do this. It's not. It's going to change how you work. If anything, it's going to open up more opportunities for people, right?
Exactly.
To do bigger and better things. But this is something, again, I'm a victim of this, right? It's sometimes we get comfortable in doing things the way we have. But sometimes you have to, trust the process and be a little, on the edge, right? It's because life is very short, right? But if you're really, if you feel that the company you're working for really is headed in the right direction, has the right, vision behind it, I mean, it should be a no-brainer. So
Davidek, what do you think? What is your 15 years vision for Teva, for the industry in this regard?
Yeah, so my 15 years is far out, right? I'm not a futurist, right? But it's I do feel that if we look back 15 years from now, I think a lot would have changed, right? It's all around data. I think there will be very unified, seamless systems that move medicines around globally, fastly, right? Which is going to be very interesting, right? I think the medicine that we'll be producing, manufacturing, will be vastly different. Obviously, with the emergence of biologics and biosimilars, right? This is a whole nother space that the world is looking into. I do think that now with the COVID rapid acceleration of vaccines, I mean, listen, Jan, I mean, we went from typically where it would take at minimum 8 years to get a vaccine like this out within 8 months. I think, and I hope from R&D perspective, right, in manufacturing that, we will learn from this and we will help, accelerate life-saving medicines in the future, right? It won't take as long potentially to get these out to the public. So I do vastly see a big change in the R&D side. I do vastly see a big change in the manufacturing side, even down to sourcing of APIs. Right? I do think that's going to change and normalize as well. So we won't be dependent on one or two markets to source these raw molecules at. And then on the commercial front, I do feel that there will be a lot of synergies created. There will be availability for really our customers to spend more time with their patients in moving forward. So it's interesting. We'll see. But by then we might, if you talk to Elon Musk, we all might be on Mars by then, so it won't matter. But we'll see, right?
Yeah, and it's great to have such innovators that come with a vision and then push against odds and against no-sayers. And I really appreciate everything really what he does. And I love that you bring him always as an example, because I always look at him also as an example, as somebody who sets his mind to something, and even something that look really nonsense sometimes. Okay, let's dig a tunnel, or
Yeah.
let's do some, let's say fly to Mars, and let's build our rockets ourselves, And then he does it, and you just need to, to have the innovation in your mind, and maybe put such people that come with such great ideas, and not love them out and say, oh, that's BS what you're talking about, and they give more opportunities to thinkers that want to bring some great innovations to the industry.
Exactly. And if you look at that, even from an Elon Musk perspective, all that aligns to his vision, right? Which is very clear. So it's he's not just all over the place. He's very clear and focused on what he wants to achieve. And that's where I think as an industry, we need to be as well.
Right, exactly. Thank you very much, Davidek. Is there something else that you would like to address that we didn't discuss and maybe important for our talk?
Not necessarily. I think this is a really good talk. And again, thank you again for having me on the program today. This is an honor. I do think if there's any message that hopefully people take away from this is, I think, the more we can collaborate and communicate with each other, I think the better it is going to be for the industry. So I think there's bright futures ahead of us. We just need to get through this current dark period.
It was a pleasure for me and an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for tuning in and watching or listening to this episode of the Qualitalks podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider sharing it with your colleagues and subscribing. So stay compliant and see you in the next one.